Everything in photography is so damn expensive. And if you're a photographer, you can probably relate to when it comes down to your birthday or the holidays and someone's like, hey, what can I get you? You're like, how about this $5,000 lens? So in this video, I kind of want to go over a few of the options that we can give, that we can share to other people that might not cost them an arm and a leg. Let's get into it. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Sergio and I'm a commercial photographer here in Victoria, BC. And I just want to start off this video by saying this is an extremely fortunate and luxurious position to be in, where people are asking you to buy you gifts. But with that aside, I want to stick to things that are slightly more affordable in this grand scheme of unaffordable things. Now, there really is so many things to buy in photography, so I broke down this video into three main categories, which are just daily use things, specialist use things, and frivolous, nice to have things. I want to keep it in the relative realm of affordable, but I understand that in photography, there's nothing really that affordable to begin with. And that's kind of what happens when you go into any sub-niche of a sub-niche of a sub-niche. The more specified something is, the more expensive it tends to become. But one of the ways that I like to get around that when I'm gifting for someone or when someone is asking to gift for me, I do often enjoy having the overbuilt, overexpensive thing of a really cheap thing. So what I mean by that is like just getting the name brand thing that's maybe $80 instead of $20 so that you can only buy it once and not have to keep rebuying it. Buy nice or buy twice, right? And a good way to start with that, it's gonna be one of these guys, a Manfrotto super clamp. There are 100 different super clamps out there and many different types of cheaper alternatives to these guys. And there are some more expensive ones as well. But I have noticed that this is a nice sweet spot for affordability and just usability. You can buy used versions of these and they'll still be going 20, 30 years later and they're in perfect shape because they're just really overbuilt pieces of tech. They also come with like literally the worst packaging of any brand of all time, but what's important is what's inside them, which is a overbuilt clamp like this. I would follow this under daily use because it's something that you might not have a microphone stand like I do, but if you have super clamps around you, you will end up using them. What's so invaluable is not knowing you need it until you need it. So being prepared and having these things on hand is just a nice to have. You can buy the cheap $10, $15, $20 ones, but they will loosen up over time as they always tend to do. And it's much more invaluable to get something that's a little bit more expensive, but will outlast whatever photographer is using them. So Manfrotto super clamp, number one, daily use. Next up, I want to touch on bags because I do believe that in this photography realm, we're always going to be collecting a ton of equipment, and it's very rare that, at least in the first decade of your career, that you'll be shooting in a studio or in a dedicated space. So that means you'll always be bringing things around from shoot to shoot to shoot, and the longer you do this, the more stuff you end up having. So one thing that we all end up having as photographers is just a multitude of bags and trillion different sizes, from super big rollers to tiny little shoulder bags like this one over here. What I think is super important, especially with today's smaller and smaller cameras and smaller equipment, is having small bags. And a small bag like this, or having something like a camera insert to put into a regular backpack, is going to be much more useful than just having a huge bag that carries all of your things. All of the huge bags that I have, I've pretty much I think I have bought them on Marketplace for, a quarter of how much they were sold for, because it was a photographer who overbought something at a store and is like, I can't fill all of this with equipment. My stuff takes a quarter of this size. So if you want a big bag, find it on Marketplace. But if you want to buy someone something that they will actually use, get them a small little shoulder bag like this that they can not necessarily fill with all their camera equipment, but maybe have all the loose ends and all the little tiny little things that come along with photography. I'm never going to put everything into just one bag anyway. I always have a multitude of bags. So it's nice to have just either little tiny camera inserts so I can use regular looking backpacks when I'm traveling or when I'm moving around, or if I need to bring a ton of stuff, I'm always going to need a tiny little bag like this to carry cables or to carry maybe just my flashes or whatever it may be. A small bag or a camera insert, probably under specialist use for this one. And let's move on. Next up, we're going to go to the frivolous category. And for this one, I brought out my very trusty favorite little jerk stopper over here, which is just a elastic with one of these alligator clips, the smallest one I could find, to grab my tether cable. This helps not pull on the port, and it pulls on this if ever someone steps on the cable or something like that. And I use these because, well, A, the jerk stopper from Tether Tools is expensive, and B, the tether blocks are only Arca Swiss, and I like to use Manfrotto products. So one thing you can get for your cheap photographer, or one cheap gift that you can get for your photographer, something that is overbuilt, is instead of this little 30-cent DIY thing, is get the name brand jerk stoppers. Think having something like this is just a nice to have, or put it under frivolous. It's one of those things that you're gonna want it in case something ever happens to your camera, and you're going to be like hitting yourself on the forehead for not having it. So saving your photographer that headache, buying them something like this might be a nice to have. Now next up, let's go back to the daily use, and that's going to be something that might be a little bit more expensive, but again, it's going to be under daily use, and that's going to be SSD drives. Now, sure, there are 4 terabyte options and there are very fast options that are quite expensive, but even smaller drives that are within the affordability range that you're willing to spend is definitely going to help that photographer in the long run. We're always filling up hard drives. We might not be buying film, but we're buying a whole lot of drives. And that is something that no matter how long a photographer is in their career, they're always going to need more and more hard drives. And now they're honestly getting really cheap and relatively, and very, very small and portable. And I think that's super cool. The spinning drives of yesteryear and having to carry them in like a special box and making sure they don't tip, and then having to like move a spinning drive somewhere was always like the biggest nightmare of all time. Now with these little things, it's like I have a year's worth of work on this 4 terabyte drive that it doesn't really matter whatever I end up doing with it. So these things are going to be super, super invaluable for your photographer friend. Next up, I would say it's just going to be a case to carry everything around. And sure, that might be a silly thing to think of, but having a dedicated place where you know your drives always are, and having them always with you no matter what in any situation, having the ability to throw a couple SD cards in here or CF cards no matter what size of camera card that you need, and having a little cable here over here so that I can actually connect my drive. This is an all-in-one memory storage option that I know always where it is. The orange line on it helps me just see it when it's a dark area or when it's just in the pile of all my black things. So like everything in photography is so black, so it's nice to have some color like this. Like I know where it is at all times, so it just kind of gives me a bit of peace of mind. And it's maybe like a $15 thing, but it's something that I would never get when I was first starting out. I'm trying to save all my pennies to buy a new lens or to buy a new light or something like that. So spending $20 on a case like this is not something that most photographers might think of, but they're going to use it, and the more they have it, the more peace of mind they're going to have. And I think in this stressful job, having a little bit of peace of mind is always nice. Now, something else that is colorful that I always like using, and if you watch these videos, you know that I always like using these, is tether cables. And you don't need to get the ones from Tether Tools. They're just the ones that I use. But a tether cable for your photographer friend, or for you, I don't know who's necessarily watching these, but a tether cable is going to do wonders for your photography. If you're not already shooting tethered, having the ability to see your end result as it's happening is going to be so invaluable for any photographer, and it's worth all of the extra little work that it takes to set up a tether connection. I think shooting tethered is one of the things that helped propel my photography the most, and giving the experience on set to the creative directors or the art buyers or the people that are on set with me, the ability to see the images instantly and make critiques on them and have the ability to tweak them. That's what makes all our photography better. A tether cable is something that is expensive because it's $100 for a USB-C cable, and you're like, what's going on? But the reason they're so expensive is because they don't drop a signal, and they're able to carry data really quickly at a distance. The longer the cable is, the slower it's going to be, and that's why you get these little boosters along the way. But not having a cable versus having a cable is going to be a much bigger, drastic thing in your photography than having a cable and then a slightly longer cable. Just getting one at all is going to be a super awesome thing for any photographer that you're buying for. I would put this under daily use, but only daily while they're shooting, so maybe specialist use. Again, only maybe daily while they're shooting, but specialist, because it depends on the type of shooting that they're doing, is getting them a nice tripod. And sure, that might be something that's a little bit more on the expensive end, again, depending if you're buying for a loved one or someone you just met. But if you can buy, let's say, $300 as a gift, or $500 Canadian as a gift, because our Canadian dollars are not real dollars. But if you want to spend something like $300-$400 on a piece of equipment for someone, buy it used. That was one of the best pieces of advice I think I've ever heard, is just to spend as much as you can for grip, especially a tripod or maybe even like a magic arm, something like that. But spend whatever it is you're going to spend, but find it used, because grip doesn't really break, especially really well built grip. And I mean that again on the same brand name level. If you have something that's overbuilt, even if it's 20, 30, 40 years old, it's still going to perform really well. Camera equipment is constantly changing, and technology is constantly changing. It's hard to keep up with that. But my tripod from 95 is just as good today as it was in 95. Sure, maybe some of the newer ones today have like quick release this and are able to do certain things a little bit faster, but the ability to stay firm on the ground and give you a stable position to shoot from is going to be the same. And spending $500 on a 30-year-old tripod is going to be way better than spending $500 on a brand new tripod, just because you're going to get a lot more value for that same dollar. One thing that's always been exciting for me in photography has been playing with colors and playing with different lights. And I want to add gels on this list of specialist use. I think you're so much better off getting daylight balanced lights if you're going to get video lights, or to have flash that's always daylight balanced, because you can modify those colors after the fact. Having an RGB with a slider that goes from like super pinkish to like a little bit bluish, and then when it warms up it gets a little bit more of a different color, and then that variance sucks. And just knowing that you can throw on a blue piece of plastic on top of a flash and make the whole room turn blue, that's pretty neat. And it's going to be a lot more powerful as a gift or as a tool in a photographer's tool belt than having a multicolored light that can do everything but can't really do anything well. A set of $30 gels is going to help that photographer actually learn and understand color theory and see why colors match well together. You can have 3 cheap $100 flashes with $30 worth of gels and create a really crazy dynamic 3-light setup that is going to cost you $3,000 in LED lights, or well, maybe not, that's excessive, but it's going to cost you a lot more in RGB LED lights, and they won't be able to take you nearly as far because they won't be as powerful as just a couple flashes with some gels on them. So learning the color and learning the usability of gels is much more powerful, I would say, as a specialist use case for this list. Anyway, I hope there's something in this list that you haven't thought about, and if there's something I hadn't thought about it, leave it down in the comments for the other photographers down below. Leave a like on your way out, maybe subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in a couple days. Later.